All right, welcome back to the Battle Buddies podcast, where we believe that you should not take on the world alone. Today, we are excited to be joined by Shihan Nick Wilson. Nick Wilson is a 6th degree black belt in Kempo, as well as having black belts in Taekwondo, Dosei Paras Eskrima, and a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu. For those who don't know, is a pretty big deal. He is the instructor training coordinator at the Kovar Satori Academy, and also is the Satori Alliance manager. Welcome to the show, sir. It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you, guys. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited.
Yes. We're also excited too because this is the first time that Adam has been able to join us for a guest appearance. So he's excited too.
Yes,
I think.
I'm finally here.
So Shihan, could you walk us through the process that you took from the very first time you put on the white belt to now nearly 3 decades you've spent as a martial artist?
Sure, absolutely. So I started martial arts in 1990. That was right after the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie came out. And, I saw the movie and I must have been super excited about that movie because my mom, shortly thereafter, got me started on a trial pass at Kovar's for my 9th birthday. That was my 9th birthday present, is starting martial arts. So yeah, I started at Kovar's Martial Arts. My head instructor is Dave Kovar. And from there, the school that we started in Carmichael, California, we moved from there down the street in, I think, 1994. I ended up getting my junior black belt in our Kovar style, which is kind of like a Kempo karate blend. And I can kind of go into the history of how the style has changed over the years, really with Mr. Kovar's growth as a martial artist. But I ended up getting my junior black belt at, I think, 1994. And after that, I took a little break because I'd been doing other sports. I was into basketball. And a couple years went by. I was, I believe, 13, 14. And this is a good just kind of reminder for all instructors out there. I was walking to the park with my basketball, and Mr. Kovar, who lived in my neighborhood, drove by, and he rolled his window down, and he said, "Hey, Nick, how's it going?" And I said, "Hey, Mr. Kovar," and he said, just kind of checking on me. And guess what? I started back the very next week, and I think when a student leaves, sometimes they feel a little bit embarrassed, that they left, and they might even feel ashamed, like, oh man, I quit, And so that was a good reminder for, I think, future people, like, hey, stay connected with your old students. So anyway, I came back about 1996. I was kind of that typical, what we call dojo rat, which is like at the school every single day for hours on end. And started helping out in classes, I think, around 97. And just to kind of, as an assistant, wasn't paid yet or anything like that, just help out on the mat. And I believe a year later, I got a job there as, working the front desk, answering phones, things like that. I'm trying to think of, when I got my different levels of black belt with Kovar's. But just kind of my history became, worked the front desk, and then shortly thereafter I started basically learning how to be an instructor. And I taught at our Carmichael location for a couple years. And then we had another location in Fair Oaks off Hazel Avenue. It's not there anymore, but I got transferred to that school. And I got a chance to work with one of our most senior instructors. His name is Shihan Ken Gruby. And so I worked under him for about a year and a half. And then I got transferred back to our headquarters location in Carmichael and was still teaching a lot. And at the time, I was having a lot of problems with my ankle. So when I was born, I was actually born with what's called a club foot, which is, so my foot, unlike a normal foot, one of my feet was turned in at a 90-degree angle. And my Achilles tendon was actually shorter. So if you looked at my feet when I was born, one foot was turned at a 90-degree angle, and my heel was about an inch off the ground. My heel wasn't touching the ground. So as a result, when I was a baby, I had to get several surgeries and casts to get my Achilles tendon lengthened and to get my foot corrected. Well, as a result, I don't have full mobility in my ankle. And all growing up, I had tons of problems with my ankle and lots of chronic pain. And so basically, when I was about 20, 21, around there, 20, even 22, I was teaching every single day, Monday through Saturday, but I was in so much chronic pain that I had to, it was just painful for me to stand. And I had a couple doctors just say, you know what, you need to go get a desk job. Your career in martial arts is over,
Man.
Yeah, your career in martial arts is over. So, and I went and talked to Tim Kovar, who's Dave Kovar's partner at the time, and his brother. And I told him, I said, hey, I don't think that I can teach martial arts anymore. I'm in so much pain. I said, why don't we do this? Why don't we make you a program director? And for us, a program director is basically someone that is in the office doing a lot of admin work. So they're doing enrollments, they're doing renewals and keeping track of billing and stuff like that. But it was, essentially mostly a desk job. And that gave me a new skill set, but it also gave me time to kind of figure out what was going on with my ankle. So from there, I ended up kind of rehabilitating my ankle. And a big part of that rehabilitation was I started up jiu-jitsu. And some of the positions that I was in jiu-jitsu, one of them is called seiza, which I'm basically sitting on my knees with my ankles flexed behind me, became very therapeutic for my ankle because it stretched out all the muscles and tendons. And from there, I was able to start teaching again, and I taught for a couple more years at Carmichael. And then we opened up a new location. This was about 2005, 2006. We opened up another location in Folsom, California, and I ran that location for about two years, maybe 2.5. I'm really proud because I actually enrolled 100 students before the doors were even opened. Yeah, it was just a wild time. A lot of people were hungry for it in that area. And then we had an opportunity to acquire a school in also Fair Oaks. It was off of Fulton Avenue and Fair Oaks Boulevard. And it was another martial arts school. It was a Kempo-based school. And this guy wanted to sell his school. And so he had about, I think, 30, 40 students. And so we ended up buying the school. And I was the guy that kind of had to take over as this other gentleman retired from his school. And so I ran this school off Fulton Avenue for about a year. And all I'd ever done was teach martial arts. And so I decided, you know what, I kind of want to go do something else. And so I stopped teaching, and I went and worked in like corporate America for a couple of years. And then I didn't like that. So I became a real estate agent, and I was a real estate agent for about 1.5 years. And then I just decided, you know what, I want to go back to, I like the way I felt when I taught martial arts. And so it just so happened that they were transitioning from one manager to another in one of our Elk Grove locations, Elk Grove, California. So I ended up joining back with Kovar's, and I can't remember the year exactly. I feel bad, but I started back as a manager at Elk Grove School, and I was there for about 10 years. I ran that school for 10 years, and then we launched what's now known as the Satori Alliance, and I was kind of running both. I was running the school, and I was also trying to start up our Satori Alliance. And then it got to the point where I was like, man, I can't do both. And so, Kovar's ended up moving me out of the school, and someone else took over. And now basically I'm in charge of the Satori Alliance and all the instructor training for Kovar's.
So could you walk us through the lessons that your coach, Carlos Valente, shared with you that sort of helped your journey to a Jiu-Jitsu Black Belt?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been lucky enough to have lots of different coaches in a lot of different martial arts. My main instructor is Hanshi Dave Kovar, but with Jiu-Jitsu specifically, a number of different coaches over the years, Casio Warnick, Carlos Valente, Pedro Sauer. The coach that I've been with probably for the last 12 years is Derek DeMano here in Elk Grove, California, under Waza Jiu-Jitsu. But at the time that I think you're speaking of, I'd got my white belt in Jiu-Jitsu in the year 2000. Got my blue belt in 2002. It took me 2 years to get my blue belt. And then it took me 7 years to get my purple belt. So I think I got my purple belt in 2009. And that was mostly because, I was only training like 1 day a week. 1 day a week, and then I think I even took 2 years off. So it took a lot longer than it really should have. But, it is what it is. And so I was a purple belt for a couple years. I think it was like 2011. And by that time, I'd already seen a lot of the people that I started with get their black belt, And even though you're not supposed to compare yourself to others, it's hard not to sometimes.
Yep.
When you see people who are like, oh man, they're so much better than me and all this kind of good stuff. And so Carlos Valente was coming down every 6 months to do seminars. And I remember we were in the locker room, changing before one of his seminars. And I asked him, I said, Professor, when every time I go with, big guys, I always get crushed. I always get smashed. And, I'm not sure what to do. And, what techniques should I try to do? And I was looking for him to give me some secret moves or secret sauce or something like that. And he kind of just said, well, Nick, when you train every day, you try different things and you just, have a good time and you mess around. And, and I just kind of walked away like, what the heck does that mean? It doesn't mean anything to me. And 6 months, I asked him the same question, hey, how do I get better? And I keep getting crushed. And he said, Nick, when you train every day, try different things, try new moves. I walked away like, I don't even know what he's talking about, right? And 6 months later, he asked the same question. He gave me the same answer. But it wasn't until the third time he told me that I really listened to the words that he said. When you train every day.
Light bulb.
Light bulb moment for me. And I was like, I'm not training every day. All these guys that I'm comparing myself to, guess what they're doing? They're training every day, and I'm not doing that. I'm trying to look for some shortcut, for some, show me the secret moves, and I'll kind of learn those, and I'll beat everybody. There's no shortcut, and especially with jiu-jitsu, there's no shortcut. It's really the time that you spend on the mat. It's not how many years you've been a belt. It's how much time you're dedicating to it. So I grabbed a buddy of mine, Robbie, and I just said, hey, let's start training. I got to train somewhere with another human being every single day, Monday through Sunday. It doesn't mean I have to go 100% super hard, but at least I'm getting some practice, even if it's light. And I started getting a lot better really fast. And 2 years later, I earned my brown belt from Derek DeMano. And then 4 years later after that, I earned my black belt. And that was about 5 years ago.
Yeah. Would you say, sort of off of that, side note, people listening right now, they're probably realizing just how terrifyingly long it takes. What was it in all, 14 years, did you say, to get your black belt?
Well, so let's see. It was 5 years ago now. It's 2022. So 2017, I started in 2000. But I also took 2 years off. Okay. So it was probably, about 14 years.
14 years, yeah.
Yeah.
And most people hear that and they go, that's a really long time. What would you say to those people who are looking more at the massive commitment before them? How do you reconcile that? And also, how do you look at people committing with you as a help? As you said, you had your partner. What does that give to people, and why should they look for that as well?
Yeah, I think... this is something I was actually talking about with my son this morning, because he's really into cooking right now. He's like watching all these YouTube videos, and he's really into this like super famous chef. And I said, sometimes we look at people that are really talented at any particular area in life, be it martial arts or cooking or basketball or whatever, right? And we don't see the behind the scenes of the hard work and the dedication that it took that person to get there. And a lot of us have heard that concept of the 10,000 hour rule, right? And the 10,000 hour rule essentially is it's going to take you 10,000 hours to become kind of a master at any skill, or endeavor. And so the biggest thing, I guess, to kind of answer your question is focus on the process and the journey, not necessarily the destination. And it's got to be fun. You know, if it's not fun, then you're not going to last through those hard times. And know what your purpose is. I see a lot of people that will start and stop a lot of different things, but the people that have that longevity towards martial arts or whatever it may be, whatever activity or skill that they're going after, they really know what their why is, what their purpose is. And I know for me, it's definitely changed a lot over the years, right? It's a lot different from when I was 9 compared to when I was 19 to now when I'm 41. My purpose has changed, but knowing what that purpose is one of the things that can kind of help me get out of bed and say, you know what, I got to train today, even if I don't feel like it, because this is the reason I'm doing it. Yeah.
One of the things that we like to talk about here is having sort of what you said earlier, having someone else to work with. Would you say that helps your having fun and your purpose, finding someone like-minded to you, or maybe not even like-minded, but someone who's just willing to put in the work as well?
Absolutely. So I think having good training partners is so important in martial arts. And I think it's one of those missing pieces. A lot of people think, in my perception, that martial arts is an individual sport, when really martial arts is a team sport.
100%.
You know, you can't get better by yourself. I mean, unless you're doing just a lot of, even if you're doing kata, even if you're doing forms, you still need to have someone critique you a little bit or challenge you a little bit. But especially when it's some type of combative art, some type of sparring art, you're only as good as your training partners. And so having good training partners, what I mean by good training partners are people that, number one, they have safety in mind, because if you get hurt, well, now I can't train tomorrow, right? And so the idea that, hey, I want to train every day. And so how can we push ourselves, challenge ourselves, but still do it in a safe way? How can we encourage one another? How can we stay positive? And so being able to find training partners like that for a long period of time, it's not easy, right? You may have someone that's awesome, but life gets in the way and they move away or they get busy and you can't make it work. And I've been so fortunate to have so many training partners over the years at different times in my life that have helped me in different martial arts. So yeah, I mean, if you find someone like that, hold on to them and appreciate them.
Yeah. Training with people who are better than you is what you're saying as well.
And not always, right? So I think that you need both, because when you're training with someone that's better than you, a lot of times you're working on your defense, right? Because especially if they're throwing a lot at you, whether it's grappling or striking, you're getting more defensive work and probably a little less offensive work. But then you also need people that you're better than, so it gives you an opportunity to kind of experiment and try new offensive skills. So, you need both sides of the equation, and you can kind of handicap yourself with someone that isn't better as you and still get better, right? So what I mean by that is, you take a lot of like world champions and UFC champions, a lot of times they're probably the best guy in the room. But how do you handicap yourself? Okay, I'm going to spar, but I'm only going to spar with one arm, right? And you get everything. Or we're going to grapple, and you get to start on top, right? You get to start and mount. And we're going to go from there. So things like that, I think that there's training methodologies that you can still train with someone that's not as good as you and get better.
Yeah, well, you'd have to have a humble partner for that too, though, to say, hey, I know I'm a little bit better, so I'm going to handicap myself and go from there.
Absolutely. And I think usually people that are good in martial arts, they have, most of the time, they've got some humility.
Yeah, especially if they've come a long ways.
If they've come a long ways, yeah.
Next question. According to The Entrepreneur, a little more than 70% of businesses fail within the first decade. What advice do you give to the starting out martial arts schools? As I know you've helped countless schools. What advice can you give to them? And what do you think that most schools get incorrectly?
Ooh, man, this is a big one. I feel like I could talk a lot about this, so bear with
That'd be
me.
perfect.
So I think, I've been super fortunate to have a mentor like Dave Kovar at Kovar's, because he lives with so much integrity. He's always taught me, be a martial artist first, be an instructor second, be a business person third. So staying true to who you are as a martial artist, continue to have that passion, that fire, because if once I lose that, then I'm just running a business, right? And I'm not really excited about what I'm doing anymore. Number two, being the best instructor that you can. And that's really what we're all about with Satori Alliance, is trying to continuously grow as an instructor. And being a good instructor and being a good martial artist are two different things. It's just like, Michael Jordan was an amazing player, but he was an okay coach, when he coached. So you could be a really good instructor and kind of an okay martial artist, and vice versa. And so being the best instructor, being the best martial artist, but as a business, a lot of people don't realize this, and unfortunately I've had seen this happen way too many times, is being a good martial artist and knowing how to run a business are two completely different things. And you got to educate yourself a little bit on how to run a business. And I think the biggest advice I'd give people is know how to keep track of the numbers. If you don't know how to, have a household budget, then you're certainly not going to know how to have a budget for a business, and be able to track revenue and expenses and pay rent and keep track of statistics. What's worse than going out of business is not knowing that you're going out of business. And so what I mean by that is, if you don't even know what your numbers are behind the scenes, then it's kind of like not knowing your stats. Like if I'm playing baseball and I don't know what my stats are. So that would be the biggest mistake, I guess I would say, is people don't understand the work that it takes to run a business. It's a lot more than just being good at martial arts.
I remember my boss, Renshi Matt, talking about his process that he took going from part-time martial artist and business owner into full-time martial artist and business owner, and how much commitment that was. Would you say that most people just aren't willing to put in the work, or do you think it's more of they're just not sure how exactly to make it happen?
It's not, there's no real definite path to take running a martial arts school. So let's say if you wanted to be a doctor, right, you would kind of have an idea of what path I should take. Okay, I'm supposed to go to school, and then I go to medical school, and then I go help out as at a hospital, and then I do that. If you want to be a martial arts instructor, unless you're kind of tapped into the industry a little bit, you have no idea how to do that, right? Oh, okay, I'm going to go train for a few years, and then I'm going to go open up a space. And I see somebody else down the street, they figured it out. Well, how do I figure it out? So I think a lot of it is just education. Not a lot of folks know or maybe even realize that just like there's best practices in other businesses, there's best practices in a martial arts school. So what I mean by that is, if I was to run a restaurant, there's best practices on how to run a restaurant, probably how to run a kitchen, and how to, how I would pay the wait staff, and how I would answer the phone, and how the website looks. There's probably good things I should do running a restaurant, and a lot of bad things I could do running a restaurant. Same thing with the martial arts school, right? There's a lot of best practices out there that are pretty easy to come across if you just can find the right people to ask. And unfortunately, if you don't know any different, there's a lot of bad habits that you could fall into that you're not even really aware of. So I guess it's a lot like running other businesses. Find a mentor, find someone that's doing really well, get tapped into people that are successful in that, because success leaves clues, right? There's people that are successful, they do things differently.
If you were to say, heaven forbid this happens, but let's say you are all of a sudden in charge of every martial arts school in the nation, what would be some of the key philosophies that you would add or change?
The key philosophies that I would add or change. Let me think about this for a second. I would say that there's a saying that that I heard from Tom Callis a while back, who's a very high level martial arts coach and had his own coaching program for a while, that it really stuck with me, and I actually wrote it down. And kind of the old school philosophy in being a martial arts instructor is, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And the new school is, when the teacher is ready, the student will appear. So what does that mean exactly? It's like there's a lot of, I think, ego in the martial arts industry, and it kind of happens organically, right? So if I'm an instructor and I get to a certain level where I'm a black belt, a lot of people respect me. They're kind of like putting me up on a pedestal, and if I'm not aware of it, I can really easily let that go to my head, where that permeates in other aspects of my life, where I think that I kind of know everything, right? And so having the ability to kind of humble yourself and realize that I'm not the best in the world at martial arts, and there's a lot to this, and I need to constantly try to educate myself to become better, and maybe even look outside at different industries and say, okay, how does a hotel, how do they serve their guests? Okay, well, guess who my guests are? My students, right? When they come into the school, my approach is, they're not there to serve me, I'm there to serve them. And once I understand that, and I can really take some time to tap the pencil and think about every single day, my job is to serve my students. And if I ask myself, it's kind of like, if you ask yourself the right question, you're going to get the right answer. And if I ask myself that question every day, how can I serve my students better? You're going to start coming up with answers, right? And figuring out ways that you can better the experience for them. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but
no, that was perfect. So we have a phrase for sort of what you're talking about earlier about the ego and getting into that. We call that the black belt lull, because it's happened for me, it's happened for a lot of our instructors, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, where when you hit that black belt, you go, man, I must be the stuff, and you start losing so much progress that you could otherwise have, because you're in that loop of, I'm the best, therefore I don't need to get better. And once you have that idea, you don't get better. So how much, as a coach of the coaches, as an instructor of the instructors, how much of that responsibility to sort of get them out of that state do you think is put on us?
Well, I always, as an instructor, try to take 100% of the responsibility, right? So if my students, and in my case, the role that I'm at right now, my students are instructors. That's how I kind of view my role. And so I feel like it's essentially my responsibility to help them realize that. And I think, to what you're talking about, that black belt lull of, it feels good to be good, right? Right now, my girlfriend and I, we're learning how to salsa dance, and I'm not good, but I know at some point I'm going to get good if I don't stop. And I think the same thing is true in martial arts. When you reach a certain level and you're training with certain people, it's like, wow, okay, I like the way I feel because I'm good. And in order to get better, you have to put yourself in a situation where you feel like a fool again. And that doesn't always feel good to feel like a fool again. I remember when I started Jiu-Jitsu, I was already a second-degree black belt in karate. And I'd already been training in karate for, about 9 years, something like that, 8 years. And I was pretty good at sparring. I used to compete a lot at karate tournaments. And I was winning, and I could spar karate for a half an hour, no problem. And when I first started jiu-jitsu, I thought, oh, I'm going to be pretty good at this. I'm a 2nd degree black belt, whatever. And I just remember, like, there was some other white belt that had only been training for 6 months that, like, tapped me out 3 times, and I was gassed out in like 30 seconds. I'm like, what just happened? And I felt like a fool. And there was a lot of times where I was like, what am I doing? You know, and getting emotional and, you know, feeling upset. And I remember one time grappling with my instructor, Mr. Kovar. You know, he was beating me, and he'd been training for years. I'd only been training for like a year. And after our match, I like slammed the ground with my hand, and I was like mad. And he was like, why are you so mad? You just started this, you know? And so, yeah, to get yourself, I think it's just to constantly remind yourself that there's so much more to learn. And that's the beauty of martial arts, is you could train every single day for the rest of your life, and you wouldn't learn even close to all of it. And I think it's just reminding yourself of that, so you don't, and constantly challenging yourself by being aware of that's a possibility that you could get that black belt lull, and kind of planning ahead of time. Okay, what's going to be my next goal? Okay, what's going to be my next goal? What do I need to do to stay hungry?
And do you think that's also our job, to encourage them? Because sometimes I feel, and maybe this is me just venting my own inadequacies, but I feel as though sometimes when I'll go to say, hey, here's this next goal, there can sometimes even be pushback, because not that they don't want to get better, it's just they want to enjoy the moment for a bit, and maybe I'm pushing too early or too hard or whatever. What do you think is the remedy for when your students don't want to move forward?
That's a fantastic question. It's funny because I think about that a lot. And I was just having a conversation with a youth counselor about this same thing. And he said something that just really stuck with me. You know, he said, my job is to make the uncomfortable comfortable and the comfortable uncomfortable. And so that really stuck with me because, yeah, I mean, people that are scared or uncomfortable, my job is to make them feel, okay, you can do this. Yeah. But there's a lot of people out there that are comfortable, and my job is to make them uncomfortable. And so to put them in situations where they're challenged, to make them realize that they're not as good as they think they are, right? And, you know, I was just talking with my friend Patrick Kelly. Actually, yesterday we had a black belt test, and we were talking about this exact same thing. And when you spar someone that's a lot better than you, it's almost like a light bulb moment. If you've been sparring with the same people for a while and you've maybe got the upper hand on everybody, and you spar with someone that's like a lot better than you, it helps you realize in that moment there's other levels to this. You know, we were just talking about Silver Fox. I don't know if you've got a chance to train with him, and I have numerous times, but I'm giving my best effort and he's giving me 10% and still tapping me out at will. And so, yeah, I think it's absolutely our responsibility as instructors to put people in situations where they're uncomfortable and they're constantly being pushed. And as Mr. Kovar says, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, but you can salt the oats. Right? I can't try to influence them. I can't force anybody to do anything. I can't force anybody to set new goals and try to go after it. But there's little tricks that I can do to try to influence them.
Yeah, that's good.
I wanted to hone in on your experiences as an instructor. The next question that I have here is, has there ever been a time that you taught a class that caused you to question your abilities as an instructor? And if so, how did you regain your confidence?
Sure. I mean, I know, I'm sure there's been many traumatic experiences that I've forgotten out of, you know, sanity over the years. I think one of the, and I don't know if it was a particular class, but it was a season in my life. Okay. And the season was when I opened up my first location with Kovars, where it was just me. I was the guy. and there wasn't anybody else to kind of help me out. And teaching the age group 4, 5, and 6-year-olds, and I'd taught that age group a lot before, but when I had my own location and I was teaching 4, 5, and 6-year-olds, I mean, I think most people think that's probably the most challenging age group to teach, right? You know, they don't have not a lot of attention span. They're going to do weird things. But I used to, like, when they would make mistakes or when they would goof around, I used to think that I wasn't a good instructor. You know, I used to think like, oh man, they're not paying attention or they're not getting this and I'm no good, and kind of get down on myself. And because I was kind of getting down on myself, I wasn't maybe as positive as I could be, or the classes weren't as fun as they could be. And it wasn't until I kind of took a step back and just realized, you know what, they're just kids. You know, they're going to say weird stuff sometimes. They're going to do weird stuff sometimes. And parents are understanding. If you've had kids, you know, kids are kids sometimes. And to allow myself to just kind of let those things happen and know that I'm still a good instructor and I'm going to stay cool, calm, and collected, even if this kid just literally went up and licked the mirror, you know, or spit on the mat or poked his neighbor or whatever, some weird thing he did, is I'm going to keep my composure. And so once I kind of came to that realization that if the class isn't perfect or if the kids aren't perfect, it's not my fault and I'm just going to do the best I can, I started enjoying classes a lot more. Mm-hmm. And as a result, I think I was probably more positive as an instructor and I was having more fun. And yeah, that was a big moment for me because there was a moment there that I was starting to question this.
Mm-hmm. Would you agree that in that experience you were almost kind of stuck in your head about the situation?
Yeah, maybe I was even probably comparing myself to others again. You know, I was comparing myself to another instructor that I saw for one class, they had perfect control of their students, but I didn't see the other 1,000 classes that they didn't have control of their students, you know? And so I was definitely in my head about it. And, you know, once I kind of just said, you know what, I'm going to do the best I can, and that's all I can do, and still try and enjoy the process, then it became a lot easier.
How would you, as a teacher of teachers, encourage a more junior instructor who is in that sort of situation, who maybe they're struggling with that, stuck in their head sort of?
Yeah, I try to give them the same. I think people learn a lot from stories. And so anytime I can share personal stories, either about myself or about other people that I've worked with in the past, about some of those challenges, I think it makes it okay when they have those challenges. It's when people think that you're perfect or you got it all figured out, that's when it becomes challenging. So I like to share some of those early struggles with my new instructors because I know they're going to have some of those early struggles themselves, and I want them to know that that's normal, that it's normal for them to feel that way. And then tactically speaking, I like to give them baby steps. So if I'm working with a brand new instructor, the last thing I'm going to do is say, hey, here's 15 kids, go teach them this for the next half an hour. Like, that's a recipe for disaster, right? They're going to, you know, not like that experience. So I kind of think of levels of exposure to what they're going to be doing in the classroom. So the first level is they're just going to be walking around, giving high fives, you know, giving praise, helping kids out, but they're not in charge of anybody yet. Then the next step is they're going to pull kids out one at a time when someone else is teaching, and they're going to give them a little mini one-on-one lesson for a minute or two, and they're going to send somebody back in. And then the third level is, okay, now you're going to take a group of students for 5 minutes at a time. And then the next level is now you're going to take the whole class for 5 minutes at a time. So I like to gradually ease somebody into it as a trainer of trainers. Just like I wouldn't, you know, if somebody was working out and they just started working out, I wouldn't say, hey, I want you to go bench press 300 pounds. And you've never bench pressed before, right? You got to build up to it. Yeah. And so it's the same thing with training instructors.
Sort of a similar question, just in a slightly different realm. Have you ever had days that you have felt apathetic about being an instructor, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing that I can do about being apathetic about being an instructor is I have to stay passionate about my own training and my own martial arts experience, because if I start to lose passion for my own training, it becomes really difficult to be genuine about teaching, genuine about teaching martial arts. It's kind of like, if I was teaching, I kind of go back to cooking because my son's into cooking right now. But if I love to cook, teaching cooking is easy. But if I don't love to cook anymore, I start to become that kind of like, cynical instructor, negative, kind of set in their ways. So, but then again, I think when it comes to apathy, it's everything has to be in balance. And so, did you get enough sleep? Are you eating healthily? Are you are other things in your life in balance? And because teaching is hard work, especially if you're teaching Monday through Saturday, if you teach 30 classes a week, that's a lot of hard work. And so, is your lifestyle set up in a way where you can stay enthusiastic by Friday?
Yeah.
Or is it Friday and you've already taught 25 classes and you're like, man, I'm tired. I feel like sitting down. And I know Mr. Kovar and a lot of instructors, it's like, they might train in the mornings, and in between them training and they got to go teach in the afternoon and evenings, they're going to take a nap. They're going to take a nap. They're going to eat something. And so that way, when they show up to teach for that afternoon, evening, they've had an opportunity to set themselves up for success.
Yeah. Take care of yourself so you can take care of others.
Exactly.